How's it going, ladies and persons? I'll be Sixkilla and welcome back to Choices That Matter and the Sun Went Out. It's time for story time, once again with Bobby. Let's continue our story, shall we? Like I said last time, we're going to keep the Aetheryte secret because I said I would. Let us continue. I was lost in the woods, I lied. The park ranger looked over at me, surprised. The woods? Why would you walk into the woods last night? It was snowing. I thought I saw someone out there. Etienne shook his head angrily. Why didn't you come and get me? What's wrong with you? They were shooting at us, and if they didn't kill you, the wolves might have. That is if you didn't freeze to death first. Did you even have a weapon? Hey, I snapped, interrupting the lecture. I know what I'm doing. The park warden sighed. Yes, of course. He glanced at me. There's a blanket in the back seat. You should get it. I'm fine, really. You were out in the woods all night. You must be hypothermic by now. Not wanting Etienne to get suspicious, I reached back to grab the blanket. The park warden suddenly stopped the car. Teacher, we should be at the edge of town. I don't understand, said Etienne, climbing out of his car. What do you mean, I asked, even though I had a good idea what he meant. It was pitch black ahead of us. If Moti was right about the location, then it shouldn't be dark. Etienne took a few steps forward and pointed his flashlight at a large sign. It said, Welcome to Flying Falls. Where are the town lights? Not more gunshots, Jesus Christ. A bright flash flooded the sky, momentarily illuminating the buildings around it. Etienne and I looked at each other. Gunshot? Etienne nodded and we ran toward the source of the flash, the beams from our torchlights lighting the pavement as our feet pounded on it. Watch the curve, Etienne warned in the darkness. An instant later, the street curb came into view and I skipped over it. Thanks. Teacher, please be careful. I nearly ran into the park warden when he suddenly skidded to a halt. Looking where he was shining his torch, I saw a figure lying on the ground. Etienne went over to it. Having a bad feeling, I stepped closer to the figure and pointed my torch at its face. It was Ben, one of the Aetherites. Etienne looked at me and shook his head, indicating that he was dead. Suddenly, footsteps were running towards us from the left. Pointing both our torches in that direction, at the same time, I saw a woman covering her eyes with her arm. She admonished us in French, annoyed, and Etienne lowered his flashlight. Translating. Put down your flashlights, you imbecile men. Etienne replied in French, glancing at me as he did so. I am Denise, Mayor of Flying Falls. The woman introduced herself in English, and I responded in kind. Etienne didn't bother introducing himself. I assumed that we were already acquainted. The mayor turned her attention to the body at our feet. What did you do? I didn't shoot him, Etienne said quickly, raising his hands. Then who? Denise asked and looked around, even though we could barely see more than 5 feet ahead. We didn't see, answered the park warden as he pulled out his phone. I'll call the police. Teacher, there is a blood trail on your right. Casting my flashlight in that direction, I found the red spots in the snow Moti was referring to. There were footprints in the snow next to the blood. Is that his? She asked, noticing what I was looking at. We should examine the body first. Got to. Police are on the way, said Etienne, hanging up the phone. I'm not a forensics expert. Neither was I, but I picked up some tricks over the years, so I knelt before the body. Wait, don't touch anything yet, the park warden stopped me suddenly. He pulled out his phone and snapped a picture of the scene. Okay, go ahead. Denise nodded at us. I'll see where the blood trail leads, she said, and followed the trail, leaving us to examine the scene. Of the Aetherites I'd met, Ben was the one I knew least about. Worried, I wondered if the others were okay. His name's Ben Jenkins, and he was a climate scientist from the University of Oxford, I said, reading his work ID card from his wallet. He's from England, Etienne seemed surprised. Ignoring that comment, I turned the body over and examined the gunshot wound. Ben was shot from the back, I said. From this position, I was pretty sure the bullet had pierced his heart. But he's lying on his back. Shouldn't he fall forwards if he was shot from the back? Etienne mused. Mr. Etienne's reasoning is reasonable. However, the disturbed snow next to the body contradicts that analysis. Shifting my gaze toward the disturbance in the snow, I agreed with Moti. Looks like someone had rolled around in the snow, and there were deep footprints leading toward it. I think he was running away from the gunman when he was shot, I told the park warden. So after he was shot, he fell and rolled over because of the momentum. Etienne deduced, and I agreed. Mayor Denise returned at that point. The trail stops just before Seraphy Falls, she told us. Then she glanced at Ben's body. What did you learn? We filled her in on our findings. I can't find out why anyone would shoot an English tourist in the back, said Etienne. Another scientist murdered. Everything was connected to Sol's research somehow. I was sure of it. But should I let Etienne know of my suspicion? I think it has something to do with him being a scientist. Etienne's expression darkened. It seems the park warden understood what I was getting at, just like my dad. I nodded slowly. I think it's connected. The park warden looked away and clenched his jaw. You're saying my dad's killer was standing right here a minute ago? That may be, Mayor Denise interrupted. I'm sorry to say, we have a bigger problem in town. Bigger than murder? The mayor gestured around us. Why do you suppose the town is dark? Power is out, Etienne answered, realization dawning on his face. On the coldest day of the year, everyone's freezing in their homes. What about fireplaces? Mayor Denise shook her head. We banned all carbon-emitting fireplaces a decade ago, she explained. Only log cabins outside of town limits are allowed to have them. There isn't a single fireplace in town? She nodded, and with our backup generator down, everyone within the town limits has no heating, she added. Etienne shut his eyes and clenched his jaw. I knew we should have fixed the backup generator last week. Too late to crave a spoiled milk, Mayor Denise replied. I tried calling the power company, but their line was busy. The forecast indicates tonight will be the coldest night in Flying Falls in 2 decades. Without the heating influence of the sun, the actual temperatures may drop even further. The sun was only out for 3 hours last time. For the sake of the town, I hope it'll be the same this time around. The hospital has a small diesel generator, Etienne said, brightening up. We can move people there. It's not big enough for everyone. We have a population of 5,000 plus the tourists, Mayor Denise said, thinking. Move the elderly and children first. I'll keep calling the power company. We need the power line and generator fixed. Etienne nodded in agreement, and she left with the phone against her ear. The park warden then looked at me. Will you help us? Of course. The park warden smiled. Thank you. He pointed to the darkness. There should be a souvenir store that way, with a tarp over the merchandise. Can you get the tarp and cover the body? I can. What will you do? I'm calling Pierre, the security guard at the bus station. We're going to need all the help we can get. For the next few hours, Pierre, Etienne, and I went from door to door explaining the situation to the townsfolk and ensuring the vulnerable were on their way to the hospital. I could hear Pierre speaking in French to the people next door as I knocked on the one in front of me. Most of the townsfolk spoke English, I'd recently learnt. The door swung open. Good afternoon, sir. I greeted a little boy in front of me. He looked to be about 8 years old. Can I speak to your parents? The boy shook his head shyly. Are your parents home? Hello, teacher. I currently require an update. While undergoing the update, I cannot access my location services. This will only take a moment. I smiled at the boy and turned away, whispering, Not a good time, Moti. What's the purpose of this update anyway? Bug fixes. Figures. Later, Moti. I understand, teacher. I shall ask again later. I turned back to the little boy. Sorry about that. Do you know where your parents are? The boy shook his head, looking at his feet. That wasn't good. I looked around for Etienne. He was currently helping an elderly couple into their car. Seemed like I had to handle this one myself. I turned back to the kid. What about a phone number? Do you have your parents' phone number? My papa will be home at 5. The boy finally spoke, to my relief. I was beginning to worry the little boy didn't understand me. I looked at my watch. A chill ran down my spine when I saw the time. Moti, how long has it been since the sun went out? It has been 4 hours and 12 minutes since the sun went out, teacher. My heart skipped a beat. This couldn't be happening. Everything okay? Asked Pierre as he walked over to me. He was looking at me and then at the kid. Can you handle this one? I told the security guard and quickly made my way towards the park warden. Etienne saw me approaching and smiled gratefully. Thanks for helping today, he stated. I don't know how. It's been more than 4 hours, I cut in seriously. The smile disappeared from his face. The last one only lasted for 3, he stated, clearly understanding what I was getting at. Etienne looked at Pierre and the kids, seemingly deep in a French conversation. What if the sun never comes back? He asked worriedly. Can the town do without the sun? Etienne shook his head. Not if it gets colder because of it, he said. We need to get their generator fixed. Suddenly a man called out for Etienne and ran over to us, speaking quickly in French. The man looked shocked about something. Moti, I whispered. Translating. According to the man, someone was recently shot, teacher. Damn it, someone must have pulled open the tarp covering Ben's body. I know, Moti. Actually, teacher, I don't believe this is about Master Ben's murder. The gunshot victim is still alive, for one. And the victim is a scientist, too. My eyes widened. Another scientist was shot? The park warden dismissed the man and turned to me with a disturbed expression. "We need a new plan to keep everyone from freezing," he said to me. I blinked. "What about the scientist?" "You understand French?" Etienne looked puzzled. "No, never mind that. Everyone in this town is freezing. We have to prioritize this," he explained, though I could tell he was torn. "Let's save the town." Etienne nodded appreciatively. "Yes, it's the right thing to do," he said, though I had a feeling it was more for him than for me. "So what do we do?" I asked, eager to begin. The park warden looked around in the darkness for a while. I had the impression he was visualizing the town. "You don't happen to know much about hydroelectric generators, do you?" he asked. "I could look up anything Mr. Etienne wants to know, teacher." I shook my head. "I don't, but Moti does." "Moti?" Etienne was puzzled. It seemed my suspicion was correct. Etienne really had no idea what Moti was. I didn't even know such people existed. "Moti's the artificial intelligence on my watch," I explained. "Anything we need to find out about hydroelectric generators, Moti would be able to help." Right," Etienne muttered with suspicion, his eyes narrowing on my watch. "Can we really trust a computer?" "I'm more than a computer, teacher. Kindly let Mr. Etienne know that." "I trust Moti, Etienne," I told him. The park warden nodded. "I guess we don't have an alternative." He turned toward his friend Pierre. "Can you handle things here by yourself?" The security guard's eyes twitched a little before he beamed forcefully. Oui, no problem," he replied in a heavy French accent while clapping his hands on Etienne's shoulders. "You switch the lights on again, oui?" The park warden nodded. "Follow me," he told me and strode towards his car. Just as I was about to follow the park warden, I felt a hand tug me back by my arm. "Wait," whispered Pierre in a hiss. There was a look of concern and distrust in his eyes. "If Etienne is hurt, I will hurt you, oui?" He warned me. Something told me the security guard didn't like me. I jerked my arm free. "I'm not planning on hurting anyone," I told him before running after the park warden. "Is there a problem?" Etienne asked curiously, as I was putting on my seatbelt. Did he see my interaction with Pierre? "What's up with you and Pierre?" A look of surprise crossed Etienne's face. "What do you mean? He's really protective of you." Park warden glanced over at me while we were driving down the dark road. Right, we're best friends." Somehow I got the feeling it's more complicated than that. After a few minutes, the car slowed to a stop. "Teacher, my GPS is working again. We're now at Curator Falls." I looked out my window, attempting to spot any signs of the waterfalls, but it was too dark. "So the generator is in Curator Falls?" I asked as we left the car. Etienne nodded. "Yes, it's the one with an observation deck for bird watchers. The owls really love hanging around here." I followed the park warden into a staff-only area. The building had clear glass walls on every side, presumably for the scenery when it wasn't pitch black. I could hear the roaring of a waterfall from where we were, but I couldn't see the rushing water. I entered a spiral concrete stairwell and descended a few flights before finding ourselves in a long concrete corridor. The lights were off, so we had to use our flashlights to light the way. "So what's wrong with the generator?" Etienne shrugged. "I've no idea." "None whatsoever." He grimaced. There was a bit of guilt on his face. "I know we should have fixed it weeks ago." "We'll figure it out, Etienne." The park warden smiled a little. "I hope so." Suddenly the hallway opened into a large cavernous room. I couldn't tell how large, but from the acoustics, it was large. There were loud mechanical sounds and a heavy moisture in the air. Starting to feel chilly again, I rubbed my arms. "The turbine room's usually a few degrees colder than the outside," Etienne said. "You could have told me earlier." "Teacher, did you know that hydropower is the oldest power source on the planet? The Greeks used water wheels to grind wheat into flour more than 2 millennia ago." "Thanks, Moti, but right now I really need to know how to fix a modern hydropower plant." "Of course, teacher. Step 1, please locate the management terminal of the plant." I leaned toward the park warden. "Do you know where the management terminal is?" Etienne looked up and thought, his brow furrowing. "Well, there's the computer-like display at the end of the room. Take me to it." When we arrived, my heart lurched when I saw the switched-off display. "Moti, we might have a problem. There's no electricity, so we can't use the terminal." "Not to worry, teacher. The model comes with a human-powered backup. Please locate the hand crank and continuously rotate it for about 30 seconds to charge the batteries." With the help of my flashlight, I found a side panel and pried it open, revealing the red hand crank. It was covered with frost. Wrapping my fist around the handle of the crank, I tried to rotate it, but it was stuck. "I think it's frozen," Etienne remarked. "No time to waste, Etienne. Let's force it on 3. Etienne looked unsure, but followed my instructions anyway. He wrapped his hand around the crank handle, leaving just enough space for my hand. 1, 2, 3. The loud sounds of cracking ice pierced the air and the crank finally budged. We cheered and laughed at our victory. Then Etienne started spinning the crank while I stood in front of the display waiting. Around 10 seconds later, just as it had seemed as if the rotating crank wasn't working, the display lit up. Excited, I studied the display while a series of symbols and scientific words moved across the screen. I have no idea how to operate the software, I realized. Moti? Teacher, please give me a moment while I consult the user manual. You're really dependent on that watch thing, aren't you? Etienne asked, suddenly as he eyed Moti with skepticism. You have no idea. I found the relevant information, teacher. Please navigate as follows. Following Moti's instructions, I managed to pull up the diagnostic section of the software. It says here that frost is detected in the turbines, I said. That could be good. How are we supposed to melt them? That couldn't be good. That wasn't that cold when the generator broke down weeks ago, Etienne said. There must be another issue. I don't see it on the screen. Teacher, please click on log history. Hang on, Moti wants me to do something, I said, and I did as Moti asked. The section of the software had dated log entries, with the most recent entries at the top. Okay, I see the frost detected entry at the top, I mumbled, reading as I went, and the next one down is... Obstruction in all turbines dated 2 weeks ago. Etienne finished with a scowl. There must be a problem with the filter. Frost obstructions in the turbines are large obstacles to overcome, teacher. It is doubtful we can rectify this issue without specialized equipment. This is hopeless, the park warden said and cursed in French. Moti agrees with you. Etienne started pacing in a manner that reminded me of Professor Sol. What do we do now? We need to do something. Are there any other sources of heat? Etienne shook his head. All the fireplaces within town limits were blocked, he said. Cursing, he continued pacing. This is ridiculous, I muttered. People have survived bad winters long before electricity. The park warden froze suddenly, the light bulb practically visible on his expression. That's it, Etienne said, a grin slowly forming on his face. That's it, you're a genius. He laughed and hugged me briefly before taking off suddenly towards the hallway. Come on. You're welcome? We're going to build bonfires in town, Etienne yelled as we ran up the spiral staircase. Bonfires? For a town with a population in the thousands? It's a fire hazard, teacher. I am uncertain of Mr. Etienne's reckless plan. Sounds like a good plan to me. I found myself agreeing with Moti as I huffed and puffed running after the park warden. We were now outside the building, heading towards his car. I hate to bring this up, but isn't this dangerous? Not as dangerous as letting everyone freeze to death. I asked when we were finally inside the car, enjoying some protection from the elements. Completely, he replied. Okay then, I replied and fastened my seatbelt. The park warden knew best. Let's go. Etienne sped the car into town and skidded it to a halt in a car park. We met up with Pierre and told him our plans. He seemed a lot more enthusiastic about the bonfires than I was. All of me is frozen, the security guard explained, when we mentioned the possibility of a fire hazard, placing the buildings around town at risk. Let them burn. Within the span of an hour, we managed to mobilize a couple of townsfolk to help build the bonfires. There was a steady stream of people ferrying old furniture and dried logs into the growing pile of flammables in the town plaza. The temperature was starting to plummet further. I could feel the icicles forming under my nose, and I was starting to lose the sensation in my fingers. It had been a while since I last felt my toes. We should light it soon, I told them, through shivering teeth. Etienne nodded. He seemed to be a lot more resistant to the cold than I was. This pile's ready to be lit. He then looked toward the car park. That pile still needs more wood, though. I want to light the plaza bonfire. Etienne handed me a lighter and a can of kerosene. Try not to burn anything else, he said, before running off toward the car park pile. Not wasting any time, I poured kerosene on the pile of flammables. Then I used the lighter to set a corner of the old newspaper aflame and toss it into the pile. Instantly, the bonfire lit up with a roar, illuminating its surroundings with an orange blaze as I felt the immense heat washing over me. The townsfolk near me cheered loudly and gathered around to defrost themselves. The mood was starting to brighten in the plaza. Not even the sudden draft of icy wind blowing across our faces could dampen our mood at that moment. Thank goodness, teacher. The low temperature was very concerning for your health. I knew I should now help build the other bonfires around town, but I needed to warm up a little first. My fingers were starting to lose their dexterity. After a moment, just when I was ready to start helping again, a man in one of the houses suddenly screamed. Oh damn it, I cursed when I looked in that direction. A man was on fire and he was rolling around in the snow extinguishing the fire. Just beyond the man was a small terrace house and I could see an orange glow in the woods. Call the fire department, I shouted. The breeze must have carried over a piece of the bonfire into a house, and that was on fire. The fire has to be extinguished before it spreads, teacher. Let him burn. Here's a bucket and snow. Grabbing a bucket from a startled townsperson, I emptied the contents, mostly flammables, onto the ground and apologized to the owner of the bucket. I filled it with snow from my feet, sprinted towards the burning house, and tossed the snow through the door onto the fire. I could hear a loud hissing sound, but moments later the fire roared again. Of course it wasn't going to be easy. I ran back and out into the lawn, collected some snow, headed back inside and tossed it into the fire. Then I did it again and again and again. Soon I was joined by the other townsfolk, each with their own bucket of snow. Someone had even found a working water hose. We worked in tandem to keep the fire at bay the best we could. The fire truck eventually arrived, but not before the fire spread to the house next door. We spent the next few hours helping the firefighters, while paradoxically starting more bonfires around town. Many hours later. It's 8 AM, teacher. How are you this morning? Warm, I told Moti, smiling a little. I was standing a few feet from the plaza bonfire. It had been a long night. All morning, yet the stars were still visible against the ebon sky. I wondered if the sun was gone for good this time. Were we going to live out the rest of our days in darkness? And exhausted, I added with a sigh. It looked as if the entire town was outdoors, gathering around the bonfires. I was sure there were some people still huddled underneath their duvets, if they were lucky enough to own the thickest ones, but most of them were outside. The normally quiet town seemed so crowded that day. Suddenly, the flickering shadows of the bonfire faded away. A couple of townsfolk gasped. I looked up to the sky, my breath caught at my throat. Just an instant ago, it was still pitch black. Now I could see the magnificent golden hue painted across the blue sky, and the bright yellow sun rising behind the silhouette of the two waterfalls. I've never seen anything so beautiful. The sun has returned, teacher. Cheer loudly. The townsfolk cheered and clapped at the sight of the sun, some hugging each other, others sobbing happily. A couple of other people I'd worked with all night came to me and gave me a hug. I looked around for Etienne, knowing that he must be ecstatic at this turn of events. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Teacher, I have good news. Miss Montague is calling. She's alive? Dolores? My eyes widened. What are you waiting for, Moti? Put her through. Yes, teacher. Dolores, you okay? A moment of silence. I'm fine, she answered, and I breathed a sigh of relief. It had been days since she'd gone missing. You? She asked, her voice still sounding strong and firm. Better now, I laughed happily. The sun's back and you're alive. Today's starting out much better than I planned. I'm glad you're enjoying yourself, she said, annoyed, because according to your phone's GPS, you're a little lost. That is untrue, teacher. I know exactly where we are. I had a feeling I knew where this was going. You're supposed to be in Peru. Why is your phone telling me you're in... a pause. In Quebec? Flying Falls, actually. Dolores sighed. I shouldn't be surprised, really. You rarely make it to our appointments on time, and you always end up somewhere else entirely. Why should this time be any different? I laughed, too happy to be concerned about her annoyance. Listen, it started with... My sense of elation evaporated where I remembered how this journey had begun. It started with Professor Sol's murder. Wait, I have another call coming in. I'll get your report another time, she interrupted. Reach me if you need resources or information. Get to Peru as soon as you can. I blinked. What's going on? Are you sure you're... She hung up. Miss Montague hasn't changed, teacher. I chuckled. My thoughts exactly. Suddenly I felt a hand on my shoulder. I spun around to see Etienne, his beaming face. The park warden thanked me profusely for my help. I was sure the sun was gone forever, he continued, looking a lot more relaxed than before. Glad to be wrong. Good, because you really need to take it easy, I said, chuckling. You should take your own advice, teacher. I recommend at least 8 hours of sleep as soon as possible. My thoughts wandered to Ben, the murdered scientist I covered with a tarp. About the scientists. The police got here a little earlier and cordoned the area. Etienne said, there's nothing more we can do. I nodded. Might as well. I would look into that later on. For now, I should go to Peru and avoid drawing the police's attention. What's your plan now? Etienne asked. I glanced toward the direction of the bus station. I'm going to have to follow my next lead. He nodded understandingly. And where is this leading you? I blinked. Why did Etienne want to know? Because it was his father who was murdered? You ass. Tell the truth. I'm heading to Peru, I said. Apparently there's something I should check out. The park warden looked thoughtfully before nodding. I might see you there. Surprised, I furrowed my brow. Why? Etienne shrugged. I thought I could let it go. My dad's murder? But I was wrong. He looked toward his best friend and security guard, Pierre. I'll say goodbye to a few people. And then I'll do what you do. Follow leads wherever they go, even if I have to cross a border or two. I nodded. Couldn't help but feel like it was my fault. I extended my hand. Good luck. And take care of yourself. You too. He shook my hand firmly with a smile. Have a good trip. After a moment, he walked towards Pierre. Somehow I had a feeling that this wasn't the last I would see of Etienne. No, definitely not. It was time. Flying Falls has an international airport, teacher. It's accessible from the central bus station. Thank you, Moti. I stepped away from the town, leaving the people of Flying Falls behind. It was strange. After spending an entire night fighting side by side with them, I felt sad after about leaving town and its people. Intellectually, I knew they were still strangers to each other, yet I felt something for them. I walked down the road. Down, down, toward the rising sun. Arc 3 completed. You and 24% of other players are going to Peru after meeting the Aetherites and saving Susan. Okay. That's an even smaller percentage than last time, but only slightly, I think. How would you like to see Peru, Moti? I asked. I would love to, teacher. I smiled. Dolores was safe and the sun was shining. It was a good day to fly. A car pulled over next to me just as I was about to enter the bus station. The driver was one of the townsfolk who had helped with the bonfires last night. Etienne told me you're heading off. If you're going to the airport, I can give you a lift, she offered. Yeah, that'd be great. We didn't say much in the car. It must be because we were both exhausted from the events the night before. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass of the window watching the snow fall. Peru's warmth would be a relief, even in the mountains. Before I knew it, I was jerked to wakefulness. My forehead was wet with condensation. Thanking the driver, the freezing wind still shocked me with its intensity when I stepped out and headed for the glass doors of the airport. It was a relief to be inside again. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of someone singing. The song you're hearing is If I Only Had a Brain from the musical The Wizard of Oz. It's not a formal performance, as there is no accompaniment and no volume enhancement. His voice, however, has excellent tone. I agree, Moti. You're smiling, and your blood pressure is easing slightly. Music is good for the soul, Moti. Lately, your physical body has shown signs of both physical and psychological stress, teacher. I am concerned about your well-being. Sometimes I need to give up my own health in order to be of use. I understand, teacher. You have some time before your flight is due to depart. Please take this opportunity to care for yourself. It has been too long since you last ate, and it has been too long since you last smiled. Please either eat a healthy meal or follow that singer. I chuckled at Moti's pre-programmed concern at the midst of all that was happening. It was true that I had some free time for a change. Eat something. I ate a hearty breakfast of eggs Benedict served on buckwheat pancakes with real maple syrup and butter. For the first time I was genuinely enjoying airport food. The world had really gone mad. I chuckled as I realized I was guiltily angling Moti's face away from my meal, as if it would hide the carbs from the camera and my own contact lenses. It was heartwarming to have someone look out for me. That and annoying. Moti was family now. I sighed and ordered a salad for breakfast. By that stage, I wasn't at all surprised the cafe served salad for breakfast. Flying Falls International Airport Premier Cafe also serves sweet and sour pork, poutine, and croissants. That and coffee. All of it apparently was made fresh for breakfast. This place smelled of soy sauce and cheese curd, which was a surprisingly pleasant combination. The food was almost as good as the location. I felt exposed next to the enormous windows overlooking the tarmac, but the baggage collectors were unlikely to pose a significant threat, particularly through double glazing glass from a floor below. The closest door was the fire exit in the kitchen, directly in my line of sight. I was well obscured from the passing crowds by an array of plastic plants. In short, I could both hide and observe. I had a spare one-way exit if I needed it. I had no reason to be on guard and I relaxed. Taking my cue from Moti, I enjoyed some old show tunes and was humming along as I watched the patterns of the workers loading and unloading the planes below. Then something made me turn my attention back to the cafe. I looked up into the scowling face of a familiar face. It was the thug Etienne and I were chasing before the park warden crashed his jeep. He grabbed me. Who are you? I gasped. Remember that crazy scientist geezer? He sneered. Professor So, I said. I was his friend. Let's just say me and the boss weren't, he said. I stared at him, wondering what kind of thug was stupid enough to tell me exactly who he was. The kind who was told to wait at the airport on the off chance that a bit player like me happened to show up. I wondered if his boss is another underling minor enough to be in the area. Probably not, if he hasn't stepped in to assist yet. But any organisation with this many fingers as many pies as a lot of underlings to spare. I christened my friend Mr. Dolt and his immediate supervisor, Mr. Boss. I wrenched myself away, leaping up and through the plastic plants and onto the half-finished dishes of an elderly couple who shouted in startled French as Mr. Dolt grabbed me again and got the salt instead. I fled into the main walkway. The people around me grunted and swore in annoyance as I shoved my way past them. It was impossible to get away from Mr. Dolt unless I used the crowd instead of fighting against it. I could yell that Mr. Dolt had a gun, or I could melt away into the mass of people. Yeah, do that, he's got a gun. I gained the attention of the security guards before I was even out of breath, and Mr. Dolt veered away into the hat shop before fleeing in the opposite direction. On the downside, it turned out that yelling gun in an airport meant that security wanted a lengthy chat with me too. After an over-friendly chat that involved a thorough examination of all my possessions, I was free to go. It wasn't fun, but I consoled myself with the thought that Mr. Dolt was going through the exact same thing. I sincerely hoped he really managed to smuggle a gun into the terminal was in deep trouble. The millenary. He rushed into the hat shop before trying to get away. I made my way back to the hat shop at my most casual sprint and immediately picked up the top 3 places I'd stashed a weapon in a hurry. Mr. Dolt left his gun in the second. There was just one tiny problem. When it became clear the second I touched it, the weapon was plastic. A fake that realistically was illegal in most airports around the world, but could be very useful, or he could get me arrested or killed. Certainly explain how he got past the metal detector. Let's keep the fake gun. I went to the bathroom and zipped the fake gun securely into the inner pocket of my wool-lined jacket. Felt good to know I had something that would be truly frightening without being physically harmful. Moti's ability to learn was something eerily childlike. I found myself hesitating before committing violent acts. I didn't want to be a bad influence. Apart from anything else, I don't want to find myself travelling with someone unpleasant. For better or worse, Moti was learning from me. I transferred my boarding pass to my outer pocket as I walked on, flowing effortlessly back into the crowd and letting Moti keep watch for me. Something about the movement of my hand into the outer pocket reminded me of the last thing I put there, the receipt from the trip to the airport. It wasn't there anymore. I stood frozen in horror. How could I be so foolish? It had my previous location printed on it. I must have dropped it as I leaned sideways to take Dolt's weapon. I'd have done better to have left the gun. Left him a signed note, sorry. At least then, I wouldn't have given him a clue about my recent activities and contacts. Moti, send messages to let people know our most recent Flying Falls location may have been compromised. Yes, teacher. I made life more difficult for Mr. Dolt, but that didn't mean I made things simpler for myself. If he spotted me, I could still find myself trapped in Flying Falls, unable to do a thing. I moved with the crowd, thinking about what to do. Moti vibrated on my wrist. Teacher, will I ever be stolen? I stopped moving, finding myself genuinely upset at the thought. I certainly hope not. But teacher, what if I am? It's unlikely, I said. You've been created with several anti-theft devices. But teacher, what if I am? I felt very much like I was having an argument with a preschooler. Unfortunately for me, this preschooler had an eidetic memory, full internet access, and could not be distracted with jelly beans. If you were stolen, I said at last, I would try very, very hard to get you back. Thank you, teacher. I know I'm very expensive. It's more than that, Moti, I said. I've spent time with you. We've learned from each other. If you weren't here, I would miss you. Thank you, teacher. I smiled back, confident I was fully understood, but it was time to go. Alright, we need to wrap this one up because we're out of time again. I think this is going to be a long one. This is going to be a long game by the look of it. Jesus, how many endings are there? Because if it takes this long to get through one run, it would take forever to find all the endings, right? I'm probably not going to be doing that, but we'll see how it goes. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks again out for me, and I'll see you in the next one.